All right, guys. So my name is Kate, and I am thrilled to get to share a little bit with you today. So just to kind of set some groundwork, lay some foundations, Jackie mentioned this, I know you know this, but I went through and I put this presentation together based on the following key points. So Jackie sent over an email in which she had, several different questions and really just kind of things that you were specifically interested in seeing tonight. So I built this presentation based off of those things. So these are the things that we'll be covering tonight. And then what I tried to do was get all of this covered, in addition to a few other things within the hour block so that we would have the remaining 15 minutes for you to just, any questions that you have, I can go back into certain areas and show you more, address anything on the rubric, things like that. So I have my chat up and open. If you have questions along the way, feel free to drop them in. If I'm like, oh, that's just going to take 30 seconds, I'll show it right now. If it's something that I think will kind of warrant a longer conversation, we'll put a pin in it and we'll circle back to that at the end of this session. But if you're anything like me, I have to get it out. So know that you have that option. All right, so now that we've got that little bit of housekeeping out of the way here, we'll go ahead and dive in. So Into Literature is our 6th through 12th grade ELA program. This is comprehensive ELA, which just means it's going to cover all of the components. So your grammar, your speaking, listening, your language, all of those different pieces. The program itself is fully aligned to your Arizona ELA standards. You'll see that in the online components. You'll see resources specifically tagged in that way. You'll also see the reporting. So I will show you that as we dive in a little bit further. Now, it's helpful to have just a tiny bit of context about the structure of the program before we get too far down the road. So what I wanted to do was just introduce you to the overall structure, and then we'll dive in. So the program itself, regardless of which grade level you're actually teaching, is structured around 6 units of instruction that are 4 to 6 weeks in length, organized around a topic and a theme with an essential question. So the idea is that students will read a number of different text selections. They're multi-genre, so a little mix of, all sorts of different things. And it's designed to help them build knowledge and understand an essential question at the end. So that's sort of the structure and the goal. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about some of the resources that are used to deliver this actual instruction. So what you'll notice here is, just a second, that you are going to have a couple primary resources. So you have your main teacher's edition and your student edition. Those are both in print. They are also both available digitally. So the student edition is consumable. It is full color. Students can write in there. They can take notes. They can annotate. The content that is found in the print student edition is also available in the digital edition. So in addition to the print resources, there are a number of other materials that are available digitally on our platform called ED. So ED is where all of the Into Literature content lives online. You will notice that we do have integrations available with Canvas, and that is either the common cartridge format or the LTI integration, just kind of depending on your needs and your co-rostering requirements. So that is available. And then what you'll also see down here is this designation of Writable. So Writable is the tool that we use to facilitate any digital publishing or writing within the program. So Writable is part of the program. You'll see all of your Into Literature content, plus tons of great standards-aligned writing resources. So this is sort of the scope of the program. Now, one of the questions, or rather the topics that you wanted me to address, was the ability to teach this sort of in a wide variety of settings with varying degrees of technology. So if you take a look here, what you're going to notice is that you have kind of a spectrum. The program really was designed to be taught in a blended format, meaning that you would have print resources, but that teachers could then share some of the digital resources. So when I say primarily print, The use case there is that students may not be accessing devices, but teachers may want to utilize some of the resources digitally, either to project or to download for students. So that's sort of the primarily print end of the spectrum. But then you also have all the way to the other side of things, in which you have a fully digital implementation, no print at all. Students would access their resources digitally and complete all of their writing on Writable. So that's sort of the spectrum here. At the lowest end, it would be primarily print resources only for students, with some digital for teachers, mainly as a mechanism to present, all the way to 100% digital implementation. Now, to make that easier, we have put together, Becca, I'll show you this in just a second. So we put together a resource, and this is mostly here to remind me to show you it, but we tried to make it easy for you to know and understand what the resources are and the availability of printing. So one of the other things that you've asked me to show is how the material looks when it's printed by a teacher or staff. So what I'm going to show you really quickly, I'm going to pop over onto Ed here. And normally when people ask, can the lessons be printed? What they're asking about are like these student edition resources. So the print student edition is available in a printable PDF version. And so it literally will look exactly like this. You can do this in grayscale. I usually scale it down just a touch to like 95%, just so that I don't run into any like margining issues, but it is designed to be printed. The other resources that people are often asking about in those scenarios, I've pulled a couple together just to show you here. So for instance, some of the text pieces, people sometimes like to make those available to students. We have printable versions of all of these that function a little bit differently than the digital equivalent. So they're super, super simple just to run off, all of these different resources. Now, there are going to be, this is just the student edition here. Now, there are going to be resources that cannot be printed. Those are ones that are like interactive in nature. So that is why this Into Literature resource overview is super helpful, so that you know exactly what the resources are. And then using the key, you can tell if it's intended to be printed, if it's, online only, if it's an actual physical resource. We never ever want people guessing. We don't want this to be like a scavenger hunt. And so this resource is part of the kind of getting started package, and just helps you to kind of know what resources are available and, which are printable. So that's kind of what that looks like in the digital setting. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to pivot a little bit, and we're going to actually look at some of the lessons. And as we go, I'll point out, if things are printable, if they're not, kind of what that all looks like in context, so that you can visualize how some of this can be used in your classroom. So with that, we're looking at a few different things here. We're going to look at the flexibility of the resources. We'll look at the data, and then how that can be used for intervention, which was on your guys' list. We'll take a look at some of the scaffolding and differentiation in the writing and in the reading, and then we will close with some of the PD resources. So starting with the flexibility of the instructional resources, we are going to take a look here. And we're going to start with what seems like kind of a silly thing to be super excited about. But the thing that we genuinely are probably most excited about within this program is the table of contents. And so the table of contents largely drives the experience that students have, drives the engagement. And so when we built the table of contents for this particular program, we were thinking about a few different things. So first and foremost, ensuring that students had access to engaging, relevant, and rigorous texts. We were looking at a mix of contemporary and classic selections, so that students kind of got the classic pieces, but then they were given tools and access points to make that more engaging and more relevant to them. And the other thing we were looking at was diversity and representation. So when we talk about that within the context of the program, we're talking about a couple of different things. So one is that idea sort of mirrors and windows, so that a student sees people that are very similar to them, to their families, to their experiences, but then also people and experiences that are completely unlike them that they would not typically encounter in their day-to-day lives. So that was kind of one thing that we really looked at as we built out this table of contents. Now, to get this right and to just have a lot of guidance and some other voices at the table here, we reached out and we partnered with Dr. Tyrone Howard, who you may be familiar with some of his work. He wrote All Students Must Thrive, and he was kind of our lead consultant on developing this part of the curriculum. And so where we started with that was the actual selections themselves. So the tenets of the program really are such that the literature reflects and honors who your students are and who they'll become. And part of that is just them being there, right? So representation, but also the ways in which we talk about our students and we talk about the lived experiences of people. That is the other part of representation. So it's not enough just to be concentrating on, sheer numbers, but rather what those stories say. So that's part of it, as well as meaningful instruction that builds cultural competence, and then support for you as teachers to create and maintain that classroom environment. So this was all informed by Dr. Howard's work and is something that we're continuing to evolve within the program. Now, to that point, the next piece here is called Fresh Lit. So Fresh Lit is a collection of kind of shorter, diverse pieces that are commissioned from young adult authors, and they're designed to kind of consistently maintain the relevance of the program. So what we've committed to with Fresh Lit is adding to this library of resources throughout the life of the adoption of the program. And so these will become available on an annual basis, new ones added, and they are always available both in English and in Spanish with complementary lessons that align with these. So these Fresh Lit resources are great to increase the relevance of the program, to ensure that we're staying relevant and just kind of on top of contemporary needs, but then also to create even more options for student choice. These are also fantastic subplans. They're put together, they're thoughtful, they're connected to your standards, and they're completely packaged as a resource that could be used tomorrow. And in fact, I would definitely encourage you guys, I know you have access to the online accounts. These are available there. This is a really easy thing to go in, download, give it a whirl in your class if you've got a couple days before Thanksgiving and you need to kill some time in a really purposeful way without, maybe starting a new unit. So this is Fresh Lit. These are commissioned, authentic text pieces from young adult authors currently working that are in both English and in Spanish with full lesson plans. Now, what we're going to do is take a look at a specific lesson in the context of a unit. So I grabbed this one from 10th grade, but I'll show you some other resources too as we kind of go along here. This particular unit is called Conflict and Connection, and it is tied around the essential question of what differences can't be bridged. So notice we give the students an essential question and then also a little more context here. So this quote, "We as human beings must be willing to love people who are different from ourselves." As we head into the holidays, this is a nice reminder for my Thanksgiving dinner here. So relevant content. And what students are doing here is they're engaging with a topic about how do we handle it when we have different views and experiences from the people around us, which I'm sure we can all relate to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop into the online edition here so you can kind of take a look at a couple things. But first, I want to frame one part that you guys asked for in your resources, in the description and in the questions. So lessons within Into Literature are designed with activities before, during, and after reading. So we tee up some different skills and things that students will be focusing on, build some background knowledge, give them an opportunity to engage with one another, and then students will do some reading and then respond. So as we dive into the lesson, we'll be looking at that, and I will be showing you these things in context I put this here largely so I wouldn't forget to tell you about it, but also I want you kind of keeping an eye to these things as we move through the lessons. So when we talk about UDL in the lessons, the biggest place you'll see this is, as it relates to some of the accessibility within the program. So you're going to see multiple means of engagement when we talk about the different text selections and the student choice activities and the opportunities for self-assessment. You're going to see multiple means of representation, so different formats and mediums, the visual and auditory support, the graphic organizers. And then one area where you'll see a lot of this is with this multiple means of action and expression. So varied opportunities to demonstrate learning, annotation tools, and actual guidance for using those purposefully, and then classroom discussions and response. So I'm going to go ahead here and pivot and go into the actual content online itself. So you should see, I'm going to go ahead and close out this guy on my screen. Lisa, can you guys see my screen okay? Did that pivot for you?
Yeah, I can see conflict and connection, the unit page. Is that what you're looking for? Okay.
Yep. Perfect. I just always like to check with at least one person so I don't get like too far down the road. Imagine. So, all right. So what you're seeing on your screen is actually the teacher's edition, the digital teacher's edition. So remember, you have this in print and you have it online. One of the advantages of the online edition is the integration of some of the tech, the highlighting, making notes for yourself even, but also any of the resources that we'll be referencing are going to be hyperlinked here. So it's really easy to take a look and preview some of these materials. So we're looking at this conflict and connection. We're going to take a look at this first selection here, which is a short story called The Book of the Dead. So I'm going to go ahead and just pop right into the beginning of that text into the lesson planning guide. So what you're seeing on your screen is the lesson planning guide, which is 3 or 4 pages that are at the beginning of every single core text. So once you kind of get the lay of the land in one lesson, taught one, you've taught them all, which is really, really nice for you because there's no guessing games here. So when you open up this lesson planning guide, you'll see your text, you'll see some recommended pacing, and remember, get ready, read for a couple days, and respond. So that lesson flow is super consistent. We give you the skills that you're concentrating on: reading, writing, vocab, grammar, and you'll see those listed here. And then just some basic information about different tools. But where it gets particularly useful for you guys is over in this right-hand side. So what we did, we released this program initially, and then it was out in the field for about a year, and we gathered a ton of user feedback. And what we found, and this will shock no one on this call, it turns out that there is no such thing as a typical middle school or high school ELA classroom. There just isn't. And so there's a tremendous amount of variety and, diversity in terms of your students, your experiences, their needs, your style. And so what we found is people were just asking questions like, okay, how can I take this and make it work for my setting? So we structured this lesson overview, lesson planning guide around those types of questions. So what if my students don't understand the text? Well, here are a couple resources you can use. What if they get the text, but they don't understand the skills? Here are some things you can use. Now here, how will students demonstrate their understanding of the lesson? Well, you've got several options. So this is an example, and I told you I'd point this out as we go, of a place where you're going to see that UDL evidence in practice. So multiple means of action and expression. They have lots of ways to show what they know. This can be the self-check. This can be, deeper text-dependent types of questions. It can be choice activities or an actual, multiple choice sort of test. So we're giving you options so that your students are able to demonstrate their learning in meaningful ways. So as we continue to go through here, these pages are consistent for every lesson. So you get some flexible skills options, some different ways to teach. Now, one of the things I noticed in your guys' notes, there were lots of requests for things like interactive instruction or, different interactions. So either student-to-student interactions, lots of discussion. And so I think what you'll find as you're going through the program is if you are trying to have a more discussion-oriented experience in your classroom, that you have plenty of fodder for that within into literature. So one example here under the flexible grouping options, that here, within whole group, small group, or independent learning, different strategies for engaging students in discussion with one another in the whole group and small group. So dividing students into small groups, using the posted questions in different ways. So you'll always have this sort of called out here at the beginning of each lesson. Other things that you'll see, support for English language learners. So any of your multilingual learners here. One thing I like to point out here, anytime you see this sort of fuchsia, that's a visual indicator to you that it is support for multilingual learners. But all of this is scaffolded. So what we have here, notice substantial, moderate, and light. This is sort of high-level background information for this particular text. You'll see more in context. But this is indicative of the level of support students need to access the content. Do they need substantial, moderate, or light support? Not indicative of, where the, learner is at. So that's how that's sort of stepped out here. So as we continue through your teacher's guide, we're not going to go page by page through this entire thing, but I do think it's important for you to kind of see some of the supports that are available for you as you're trying to meet the needs of your students. So on the left-hand side here, what you're seeing, this is what we in the industry, we call the wraparound. And all this is the questions and support that go with the particular text in the center. So this is your copy. This is like the student text, what they have in their hands. So another thing that was sort of in the list of requested items was this idea of giving students an opportunity to elicit, background knowledge and experience and support. So these engage your brain activities here, as well as what you'll see are called the spark your learning activities, are places where you have a couple of choices as to how you want to engage students in the text. Now, all of this will kind of be in the wraparound here, and you'll notice that I'm still at this point sort of in the early stages, the get ready section. So Becca, I see your question here. Is there scaffolding for struggling readers? And it's in a couple of different forms. So it really depends on how they're struggling and really where you're at in the lesson. So notice here, this little red indicator, it's telling me about a tool called the text sketch. So if I have students that are struggling, I can give this visual advanced organizer to give them sort of the key salient points of the text they're about to encounter that they can then use as a note-taking device. This is in English, it's in Spanish, and it is printable. So there are tools like that. That's not the only one, but what you'll notice as you kind of page through here is that you've got these little supports tucked into the margins so that you know how to provide support as you move through. To that end, things like annotation. I'm going to show you what that looks like in the student text in a couple minutes. You're actually seeing an example of I used the annotation to just kind of point out some things so that I would remember the things I wanted to tell you based on your questions. So this is kind of what the annotations look like, but we don't just, put them in the text and go, go nuts, because students get really stylistic or they don't use it. And so what you will notice is all of that is stepped out for you in the teacher's guide so that you have some really clear instructions on how to facilitate some of the close reading, how to use those annotation tools. So kind of keep an eye to things like that and, the background. So again, giving opportunities to elicit their background and their experience. These are all tucked into the lesson as you move through. So students will do some reading here, make some connections. Again, any supports that you need are in the margins. So depending on the needs of the student or the skill. I wanted to point this out. I know you had something in here about other content areas. So you will notice in this particular example, in the selection, there's some conversation about this sculpture. And so in this particular cross-curricular connection, it's more of a fine arts-based one. But as you're reading, you'll see cross-curricular connections called out to fine arts, to language work, to math, to science as relevant. So as you're looking through, keep an eye to these cross-curricular connections as they're explicitly designed to help make some connections across the program here. Now, as we kind of continue through here, notice you've got everything sort of stepped out for you. I do want you to see here these little quick checks. So you do have some formative assessment options that are baked right in here. And so as it relates to students to student discussions and interactions, and also the ability to sort of reflect here and self-assess. So this little quick check would be administered after the first day of reading here. And notice it's not just a, here's your exit ticket, jot down your answer, we'll see you tomorrow. This is an actual activity where students are working together, they're playing, they're having a discussion. It's called Wipeout, where they write their answers on the whiteboard and, fastest one wins. So we tried to create some engagement even within these little quick checks along the way. So again, all of this is tucked in just into the margins to, again, facilitate some of those conversations and questions. Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump to the end of this particular selection here, so you can kind of see what this looks like. And I'm going to go back one page, because we conclude each lesson with a little quick check. So again, opportunities for self-assessment. They can do this in print here, but again, if they do it online, they can do it online in their student book as well. And then notice a collaborative discussion to connect back to the essential question. So again, lots of opportunities for students to engage with one another and discuss the text and the things that they're learning. So we conclude each of these lessons with opportunities for response. Now, you usually at this one, we had 2 days, so you would kind of pick and choose, or you can even give students some choice as well. So notice on one side here, we have the analyze the text questions. I'm going to come back to those in a second. These are text-dependent questions that vary in terms of their depth of knowledge levels. So there was something in here about higher order questioning. You'll notice as you move through the actual lesson itself, all the questions and tasks within the margin, varying levels of complexity to ensure that you're able to engage all of your students, but it's explicitly called out within the analyze the text so that you can be strategic about the questions that you're using with your students. And then we've got these choice activities. So for each core text, they've got a few different things they can do. They can write, they can research, they can do a media project. Oftentimes you'll see discussions tucked in here as well. So these are the activities that conclude a lesson here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you now through the lens of the student view here. So I'm going to come back to Discover. Everything we've looked at so far was in the teacher view. Okay, so I'm going to show you from the Discover page. This is what your Discover page looks like. This is where your content lives. So it's organized according to units of instruction here. So we're just looking at Unit 1 right now. So if I click there, I get my blue button, which is my teacher's edition, or my student edition. And these are the two kind of fast links to the things that I'm going to be using most frequently. So it's really easy for me to dive right into the text itself here. So I'm going to open up my student text here, and this is what it looks like digitally. Okay, so remember we saw this image earlier. It may feel like many years ago. It was really only like 10 minutes, but you've got the opener here for the unit of instruction. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this same Book of the Dead text. And what you're going to notice here is we begin the lesson with what we call the lesson opener, imagine, but it's actually super, super useful. So if we scroll down, all of the differentiation resources that are explicitly tied to this text, okay, so not necessarily just the skills, but to this text are going to be included below. So these are hyperlinked, they're easy to grab, students can self-serve. If you have an interventionist, you have someone who's providing support in your classroom, you have parents at home who want to help, any resource that is explicitly tied to this text will be linked here so that they have it and you don't have to go find it. So Becca, in terms of, other scaffolds that are available, things like the text sketch, graphic organizers are here. Things like that are going to be available for them. And we'll take a look at more of those as we move forward. Now, when we get into the text itself, I'm actually just going to jump right into the reading here. I'm going to skip over that get ready section for the time being. But when they get into the text here, what you'll notice is it has a little bit more of a scrolling look and feel. So again, thinking back to the beginning with that kind of spectrum of how you could implement this content doesn't function exactly the same way, but it is the same content that lives in the print student edition. So if you had students who preferred being in the print student edition and some that preferred being in the digital, and you wanted to kind of give them a choice, you can do that. And these paragraph numbers let you get everyone on the same page, so to speak, as you're working through. So it's fairly easy to do either, or even just display from here. So this is what the text looks like. I'm going to show you the audio really quickly.
The Book of the Dead, short story by Edwidge Dandica. My father is gone. I am slouched in a cast aluminum chair across from two men. One, the manager of the...
So I'm going to pause this. The good news is you have this in your accounts and you can listen to this at your leisure. But you do have full read along highlighting here that is available for you. And it is going to be just kind of tucked right in. They can turn that off and on if they'd like. And the nice thing about that, it is designed to be kind of performative in nature. And by that, I mean that if it is told, in this case, the perspective of a young woman who's sort of learning some things about her father, it's going to sound like a young woman. If it is told from the perspective of a 13-year-old girl, it'll sound that way. Those of you who teach selections where you have a play or an excerpt from a play, you'll have multiple voices to increase engagement. So that's kind of a nice tool. Audio lives here. Now, as you kind of scroll through, you're noticing some of my highlights here. So we saw this when I used it in the teacher's edition, but it's very easy for students to highlight and annotate. So you can use different colors here. You can just underline, however you want to do that. And then you can add notes. So adding notes will be helpful. And don't judge my typing. So I can save that here. And students can access any notes that they've taken right in this little margin right here. So these are highlights that I've made. These are notes that I've taken, like interesting. Adding notes will be helpful, that deep insight that I just added here. But I can jump to any of these things on the page in case I don't necessarily want to, search everywhere for it. Now, what's really cool is as a teacher, so you can see this is my teacher book, you're able to go in and see what students are doing, or in some cases not doing, in their actual student book as well. So we're going to go to this student right here, and she's an overachiever. She's done a tremendous amount of work. It's me. And so you can see my little sample work here. I can view these things on the page and jump right to them. And then I can toggle to other students in this section. So Katie is out here doing work and Tommy has done nothing. So I can toggle between those different things right from my teacher account here. The other thing you can do is you can view associated standards. So notice my Arizona standards are tagged right to this text, and I'm able to just kind of open those up and take a look if I need a refresher on what exactly it is that I'm concentrating on with this particular text. So as students move through, we've talked about this kind of at length here, but I do want to point out, remember, the flow of a lesson is to get ready, to read, and to respond. So they can do these responses on a piece of notebook paper in the print student edition, the consumable one. They can do it right here. But there is another option in the digital format only that's really, really cool. So you can use our tool called Writable here, and it will allow you to answer these questions digitally. So I want you to just take like a mental screenshot for a second. Notice our first question is interpret. What does Annie's mother mean when she compares herself and Annie's father to two seeds planted in a rock? Remember that, okay? So with Writable, what we've done is we've made it really, really easy for you to take a look at some of these questions and at these text at the same time. So notice my copy of the student text is tucked right in here now. So I've got this here. And then over here, I have my questions. So notice, same question. What does Annie's mother mean when she compares herself and Annie's father? Same question. So students can respond here. They can do audio or visual or video recording as well. You can also, if you have students with assistive technology tools like speech to text, those can be enabled here within the writable piece. Now, here's what I want you to watch though. So if you completely tuned me out because it's late at night and I'm your second presentation, come back for 1 second because I want you to watch this. So here's the value. Okay, so we have that initial prompt. And so Becca asked, okay, what about some scaffolding? Watch what I can do here with these questions. So with level 2 scaffolding, I now have the same text, the same questions, but we've added some little sentence stems in here. So now Annie's parents are like 2 seeds planted in a rock because, none of them ever know how to, restate the question. So they've got this kind of starter here. But you may have students, you will likely have students who need more. So if I switch to moderate scaffolding, same deal. Got my text, I have my questions, but now I can hover over these and I get a little bit more support. So Annie and her mother saved Annie's father by, well, go ahead and reread paragraph 101 and let's see if you can figure that out. Okay, so scaffolding built in here. And the final one, this is, you have students who you could give them all the scaffolding in the world and they're just not going to be there yet. This is going to give them an adapted version of the text. And now they are answering a subset of the questions in which they only have to focus on the targeted passage. So these questions are modified. They are only looking at a small subset of the text, but they're doing the same types of work. It's just a more accessible format. And of course, they can always toggle back to the original Book of the Dead text over here if they'd like as well. So this is writable. It is used to respond to literature and then also to facilitate some of our writing instruction. So we're going to see this again in a couple of, like 15 minutes. But I just want you to know that all of your response activities to the Into Literature content are built in there. So you don't have to create anything. You don't have to make anything here. Super simple to differentiate and support your students. So what we're going to do here is we're going to kind of circle back because now we have concluded a lesson. Okay, so we've gone through, we've concluded a lesson, we've taught everything. It's time to assess. We need to see what's sticking. We need to see what's available or what they're getting. So within the program itself, we have a bunch of assessments, frankly. So more than you're probably ever going to use, but all with different purposes. So kind of taking it from the top down, benchmarking, the NWEA map growth data can be integrated into our system. And there's some kind of cool things that happen with that we'll talk about in a second. But then you'll also have unit assessments and tasks, selection assessments, and formative checks. So you've got lots of little things that are kind of going, that are available to you in terms of assessments. So I want to talk to you about that high level one, about some of the benchmarking here. So
Kate, can we stop for just a second? And
yeah.
one of the questions to go back to is, are the annotations and student responses available to be seen by the teacher in real time?
Yes. Yep. That one's easy. So yep, remember that little T review, that will update in real time and it's all time stamped. So that is going to be super, super handy for you. So with the assessments here, a couple of things, we'll talk about that NWEA and then kind of drop down in. Now with the NWEA, if you're familiar with that, map growth data can be administered. It's typically 3 times a year. It gives lots of great information. So as a classroom teacher, our district used MAP. And so I remember getting these like printed off reports that I had to spend hours kind of going through the data and then figuring out like, okay, these are the domains where they're struggling. How can I then find things in my core program that I'm teaching every day to address these needs so that we'll see growth down the road? It was a valuable process, but it was incredibly time consuming and it could have been faster. And now it is. And so with this integration of the NWEA map growth data, this will live in the same platform on Ed. So you'll get this data, you'll have, all of the, the RIT score, performance levels, all the things that you would expect with the NWEA map test generally. But the really cool part is that now it's integrated with some of the actual program assessment data as well. So now when the map growth data is administered, or when that test is administered, and when I say now, let me be very clear, actually, back to school of 2024. So not like today, but what will happen is that map growth data, you can administer that 3 times a year. You get everything you would normally expect. But what will also happen is that data plus any data that you get from administering those online assessments with your HMH content are going to merge, and you will be able to use that to create groups, to see resource recommendations, to see their performance by standards. So it makes it incredibly purposeful. And it also makes it much easier to provide your students with support when they need it, and find resources within Into Literature that can help drive student growth. So incredibly, incredibly purposeful here. Now, if you choose to administer assessments on Ed, I'm going to come over here for a second, and I'm going to pivot my screen back to the kind of main area here. I just want to show you really quickly. If you choose to administer reports on Ed, you get, or assessments on Ed, you get some pretty useful data here. So what you're seeing on your screen is just an aggregate of any assessments that I've given at this point. This is actually called the differentiation donut. Like, I don't call it that. That's really, unfortunately, what it's called, but you'll remember. And so I can see, these are my 10 students who are at this time on level. Here are my students who are struggling in the class generally. So I've got my, individual assessments below. And let's say I wanted to dive in and take a look just at this unit assessment here. So if I open this guy up, I'm going to be able to see now this same differentiation donut, but based on a unit test. But if I come here, now this is showing me just on this unit assessment, not overall. So I've got 12 students on level, 4 who are below, and then 7 who are doing quite well. So I've got my little item analysis here. So these are the top 4 most frequently missed items, as well as my 2 lowest performing standards. And remember, my account's a national. This will be populated with your Arizona standards here. And then if I go down below, I can see individual students and their performance, time on task, and a really granular item analysis. So if you need that standards data information, you've got it. The other thing that's kind of cool, you can create groups here based on this data. And these are always customizable. So if you're looking and you're like, ooh, you know what, like Mandy was just having a bad day, we're going to move her up, but Ken got lucky, I'm moving him down. You can always customize this, and it allows you to assign resources. So just kind of a handy tool here. The last thing I'll show you is relating to the standards. So if you administer the reports, or the assessments digitally, and of course, you don't have to, right? With the exception of the map stuff, any of our assessments, the unit tests, the selection tests, the unit tasks, any of those can be completed in print. Okay. So again, thinking about that spectrum of print to digital, you have a choice. Okay. Now, if you choose to give these digitally, though, you do get the data here. So I just want to show you really quickly that I can now drill this down a little bit, and I can see, so for each individual standard, I can see how my students are doing. A 66 isn't great for a class average. I'd like to see that a little higher. So I can kind of come in here. I can take a look at which students and create groups, or I can even see recommended resources that might offer support for them. So lots of great information to help you support your standards, to help you support your instruction, and to help you support your differentiation and intervention. Which brings me to, back to your next little section.
Yeah. And if a student breezes through a test, can the test itself be reset so they have to retake it?
So that's a great question. And actually, so the test can't be reset, but you can reassign a new test. And that's as a protection for you, so that if a parent calls and says, why did you have my sweet little baby retake that assessment? You can say, because they took it in 2 minutes and 13 seconds and they got a 12%. And here's a screenshot, so it's really a protection for you for documentation purposes. But yes, you can assign those again, and they would just have a new at bat. Yes. So the assessments here, if you're someone who really wants to take a peek at these, you've got different resources and materials, everything under the all resources button. You can just come and you can preview any of these assessments. Notice, like I said, way more than you're ever going to use, but that is so that you can really be intentional about the data that you're gathering and the information that you're using. Because the whole reason we do this is not so that we can fill out endless report cards. It's so that we can really see what's working and provide some support along the way. And so we're going to take a look at some of the differentiation and the intervention resources. So within this program, you're going to see that we look at this in a couple different lenses. So you can choose to differentiate the content. So you might give students an adapted version of the text. You might give them a completely different text entirely, maybe a leveled text. You can change the process. So think back to that teacher's guide and all that support in the margins there. That would allow you to differentiate the process. You've got the learning environment. So if you're doing whole group versus small group, if you're doing discussions, and then a whole suite of skills-based activities, things, you've got videos, you've got anchor charts, you've got all sorts of stuff kind of tucked in along the way here. Now, what we're going to look at is how these resources support the students in your classroom. So we'll look at this starting with our striving learners. So this is a resource that is a great print-based resource. It's called the Skills Coach. It matches up with the skills that are taught within the program, and it is a small group reteach lesson that is used by you, the teacher, to reteach a particular skill or strategy, and it can be used with any text. So they're super, super handy. You've also got the peer coach video and the anchor charts. These anchor charts are printable, or they are also available in a slide format that you can easily project and display for your students. And they are available both in English and in Spanish. You will see the adapted versions and summaries of the main core texts. So for some of our heavier hitting standards-based instructional resources that are found in that main student text, you'll find these adapted and summary versions that are available to just help make the text more accessible to all of your students. So you've got those guys as well. And then finally, that text sketch. So remember, visual representation of key components of a particular text. So these are multi-genre. If you're in a fiction piece, it's going to be, sort of like plot mountain, right? Like characters, setting, rising, all of that type of stuff. But if it is nonfiction or informational text, you'll see it's basically just the who, what, when, where, why, important information they need to know. These are printable, they're PDFs. And they are intended to be, written on and used to facilitate note-taking and support. For our advanced learners, and honestly, I'm just going to give you guys a caveat. This is a way to frame this mentally. All of these things are helpful for almost all of your students. So the leveled text library has like hundreds of texts at all different levels. This does not mean that there are only, higher level texts. This just is a nice resource to support some of your advanced learners, but really all of these are useful for all of your learners. It's just helpful to know you have them. And so you can assign these, and students can even self-select these resources as well. You've got some great project-based learning activities. These are fantastic for early finishers. If you need something purposeful for your students to do, if you're working in small groups, or maybe pulling a couple of students to, revisit a skill. And then finally, for our multilingual learners, you're going to see, if you kind of remember, again, from many moons ago, way in the back here a while, in your lesson planning guide, this is called out at the beginning. You've got that scaffolding and those supports. It's sort of high-level information about the text you're about to approach. But remember, in the margins as well, you have those little boxes that give you information, specific supports and strategies. Sometimes these are around vocab, sometimes they're around speaking and listening, sometimes it's about accessing the text, but it is scaffold specific to your multilingual learners. And you'll also find oral assessment options for them as well. So lots of resources to support you baked right into the TE. Remember, you've got the text sketch is available both, as English and in Spanish. You've got those anchor charts available as well. So lots of different resources here. So this slide is not the prettiest slide you've ever seen. However, it is useful. There's method to the madness here. So if you are someone who is particularly interested in differentiation resources and you want to explore some of these, please feel free to take a screenshot here. I organize them according to that spectrum. So thinking about your print versus heavily digital resources, these are going to be ones that would be like in a primarily print environment, things that you could either print or, get in the hands of your students. These are ones that you could sort of walk through together. Maybe you post it up on the board and you work through, in groups. The last two things I'm going to show you, the level up tutorials and then one more, are absolutely digital only. So it is predicated on like a little tutorial in which students would need to log on and work. So think of that spectrum, this guy here, and then this next one, Waggle, is going to be a digital only resource. Now, Waggle is a tool that is an option for additional kind of intervention and differentiation that is tied to Into Literature. So it lives in the same platform, same username, same password, uses the same data. So it's going to take your map growth data and it will then assign students activities based on their particular needs, and it just automates that process. These are going to be some standards aligned resources, and you have the option also as a teacher to go in and assign some of these based on what you're teaching in Into Literature. So kind of a couple ways to use this. And I don't know if I said this out loud, but I put it here so I wouldn't forget. This is 6th through 8th grade only. Okay, so this is an additional option for differentiation that provides games, activities, and just a lot of reading practice to shore up some of those ELA skills can be used to support the core or for differentiation, intervention, typically tier 2. So those are some of the resources that you have access to for differentiation and intervention here. But I want to close. I'm kind of looking at my time here. I set a timer and I told you I'd stop at an hour and give you guys the rest of the time. And I have 2 more things I want to talk about, so I think I can get it. I want to talk for a couple minutes about writing, and then we'll close with some of the professional learning. So writing, we've already discussed to some degree. You saw this should look somewhat familiar here. That students are always going to be writing in response to literature. They may have text-dependent questions. They may be doing summaries. They're always going to be writing in response to literature. But as we all know, that's only one part of the writing that students need to be able to do. So part 2 is that more kind of formal writing process-based task activity. So this is where you see things like narratives and things like persuasive writing, things like arguments, where they're learning the types of writing genres and they're actually taking a piece through the writing process. Now, to be clear, you can do this on a sheet of notebook paper. All of the pages I'm showing you right now, like this right here, is actually in their print student edition. So you could have them, do the majority of this paper pencil if you wanted. I'm also going to show you the digital option. So know that you've kind of got a spectrum of opportunities here as well. But the content is structured such that students are planning, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing. It's the writing process. So it's fairly straightforward here. The nice thing is though, and what you're seeing on your screen here now is the e-student edition, but we give students a topic and a prompt. So in this case, I believe this is 9th grade, they're going to be writing an argument. So in this case, they get a prompt here, they're writing an argument, and they have all of the graphic organizers and materials they need to kind of begin brainstorming and drafting right in their student edition, both in print or in this case, in the online student edition. Now, what we also do here, you'll notice that some of the texts in the program are designated as mentor texts. And that means that students will have read them once in the context of their reading and then circle back and use them to kind of evaluate through the lens of author's craft. So in this case, they're writing an argument and they're being asked to cite a source. So we're going to go back and we're going to take a look at this text that we've already read, and we are going to see how this author chose to cite a source or how they did it. And we can use that then as a model for our own writing. So all of that sort of woven in that planning and drafting process. Now, as they move forward, this is like a really weird thing to like as much as I do, but it's probably one of my favorite parts of the writing instruction. I really love the revision process. I'm a rare breed here, but with this, you're going to notice that it really puts a little bit more responsibility on your students. So they've got a revision chart with very clear look-fors in their writing. And spoiler alert, this is tied to their rubric, which is also included. So they are going to use this. And now, okay, does the introduction contain a clear and reasonable claim? Cool, prove it, show me, highlight the claim, not just 5 stars or 2, thumbs up. You have to show me. And same thing with organization, number it, mark the transitions. All of this is putting the responsibility back on your students. So again, an opportunity for self-assessment for your students. Now, I told you a minute ago, you could do this either fully in print or you can do this online. So if you choose to do this online, this is another time where you could leverage the tool Writable. So I'm going to show you really quickly kind of what this looks like here. We're going to grab this guy. I'm just going to show you a little preview. And so again, you're going to have the student text here. And what's nice is they have all of the text that they may need to cite text evidence or pull from. This prompt here is the exact same one that lives in their student text. So they can do, they can type. You can hook up Google Docs if you want to. Those of you who get the unique privilege of teaching MLA and APA, well, probably not APA, but certainly MLA formatting in 12th grade, you can have them do their writing in Google Docs and then export it. There are some reasons you may want them to do it in here still, so that you can do some of the formatting work. But they've got their little check and submit. So this is going to give them their rubric here. You can set this up so that they do a self-check first before they ever submit this to you, where they have to go and review their work. The other thing you can do that's kind of cool is you can do some anonymous peer review. So what that's going to do is, instead of the physical paper shuffle, right, where I collect them and move them around, they get anonymous writing from their peers served up, and then they get to go ahead and provide feedback. So it doesn't matter that you're my best friend or that we got in a fight at lunch, I don't know who I'm grading. And so I can provide this feedback, but then notice, if I'm going to give you 1 star, I need to tell you why. And so I've got some really helpful sentence prompts here to start me on providing more meaningful feedback to my peers as I'm working through. You can monitor, it's anonymous, but it's not to you. So if you need to moderate it, you can. You can see if students are making any changes based on the feedback. And you'll also notice there's some really cool AI grammar checks tucked in here, as well as plagiarism checks powered by Turnitin. So I know the bane of everyone's existence, it's a love-hate thing, but ChatGPT, some of those tools, Turnitin does this really well. They're figuring it out, and they're obviously heavily invested in making sure they get this solved. So when Writable, when everyone kind of came to the table to figure out like, okay, if we're going to do a plagiarism check, do we like build our own? The consensus was no, let's reach out to someone who's doing it really well, and we're going to have them power all the plagiarism checks. So what I am not saying, and I want to be really clear about this, you do not get a Turnitin license. You get access to use the Turnitin plagiarism check within the context of Writable, which is super, super handy. So AI-powered support, you've got all of this here. I have like 1 second, so I'm just going to show you this really quickly because I think it's neat. So tools like Quill, No Red Ink, those types of things, they're not connected to your core. So they're great, but you have to do some scrambling to figure out how they connect to your core ELA program. With Writable and Into Literature, you don't have to do that. All of your Into Literature content is already pre-built and ready and available for you here, but you get all of the other stuff as well. So we've got like the weekly high fives, which are just little current event prompts that, you know, we give you a news article or a video. Want extra practice with arguments, informational or narrative pieces, that's all there. High school teachers, do you need extra support, you know, college essays, advanced placement, even, you know, release items for Park, Smarter Balance, some of those high stakes assessments. This is all pre-built into the system and included as part of it. So you get the benefit of all of your core already ready to go, and then the ability to use any of this or even create your own prompts. So super, super helpful resource here. So I am watching the clock here, and I know I'm creeping up on time. So I want
one question. I think you kind of
yeah.
answered it, but I just wanted to make sure. So can Writable detect AI written work? And I think you kind of did clarify that, but I just.
Yeah, so it can. And if you use the plagiarism check, yes. I will be honest that so that's all powered by Turnitin and their algorithm. We've come a long way with that. But the beautiful and absolutely terrifying thing about AI is as fast as we figure it out, it evolves and like improves. So it is optimized to do that, and we're continuing to grow and evolve that. So it may not always be perfect, but that is why we are working with Turnitin, because if someone's going to get this right, it's going to be them. All right, so last thing I just want to kind of mention as we close up here is just around the support. So just like I mentioned earlier, we know that there's no universal middle school or high school ELA classroom, just like there's no universal middle school or ELA teacher at this point. You know, everyone is sort of in a different spot with different experiences. And this program was really designed to be sort of a learn as you do it kind of program. So what you're going to find is that tucked into the actual program itself, you have support and PD along the way. So there's always getting started sessions to kind of get the ball rolling. But this teacher success pathway is plugged into your accounts right on the landing page, and it will take you through your first 30 days of school. It's self-supported. Administrators get, you know, documentation if you complete it. So if you need stuff for like certification or hour tracking, but it's super relevant. So when you open this up, it doesn't take a tremendous amount of time. Little video, the interactive classroom just is introducing you to what are the resources I'm actually going to be using. Here they are. Here's what they look like, kind of the what's in the box. And then the question I get asked almost every training, do you have a video of like someone doing this and like putting it all together? Like, good news, yes, here's a quick video for you. So you have the inside the Into Literature classroom, preparing and planning your instruction and grading and using the reports. So you don't have to figure this out all on your own. This starts whenever someone gets a new teacher account. So if you're a long-term taking over for someone partway through the year, you're going to get that training and support even if you miss the back to school kickoff. So you've got that, as well as the content in Teacher's Corner, which is just, you know, additional live events that you can register for. These are great for PLCs. And again, administrators get this information, so you're not just doing it, you know, for the love of the lit. But you've got that, as well as additional program support. So this is all baked into the program, part of what you experience no matter what. But the final thing I'll just kind of mention here is a new offering, largely based on the fact that we know release hours are difficult to come by. And I think it's just tough right now. And so HMH Coachly is a built-in PD option that is tucked right onto the Ed platform where you can kind of self-serve PD and coaching. And what this does is it's subscription based. So typically districts may do this, for lead teachers or a couple coaches, but it is product specific training and support on demand that you can schedule on your own. Anytime messaging and, kind of unlimited messaging access if you're trying to problem solve things. So it's just kind of a nice thing to know that is available. So I know that was a lot to listen to because it was a lot to say, but we covered a lot of ground here. So just remember, flexible instructional resources, lots of great data and information that help you actually drive instruction, scaffolded reading and writing lessons, and then support for every teacher. That is kind of what we bring to the table in terms of the Into Literature program. I'm trying to also multitask and look down my list, but I'll open it up for you guys. Becca, if you want to come off mute, girl, you come right on ahead. Do you guys have any questions, things that you want to circle back and take a look at, or anything even on your rubric that you haven't been able to see yet? Anything you're wondering? And I'll actually stop talking for a moment. Wait time.
Or they're just ready to go home and go to bed, maybe.
I know. I was like, this is a risky game.
For
They're
dinner
like,
time.
Yeah. We heard, we came, we saw, we heard. Okay, so
what about a district dashboard for people in district office?
yeah, so it's going to look very, very similar to this actually. Let me see if I can log in. But basically you will have access to content, which is super helpful if you need that. But then your reports will basically look exactly the same. The only difference is there's sort of, think about it almost like baby birds. So you've got like a teacher can see the teacher data. School admin will be able to see all of their teacher and student data. District admin would be able to see all of the schools and all of the teachers. So it almost just, it's like a superpowers it up a little bit, but you would get this same information, same reports. I think the addition you would get also is usage. So you would be able to kind of see who's logging in, who's using some of the accounts and the data and information. So yes, helpful reports. Some of those are new for this year, and we've been getting some really good feedback from particularly instructional coaches and building admin who are trying to just kind of help support teachers instructionally. So yes, admin, district, school and district admin accounts are available.
So I'd just like to ask for clarification. I think I might have missed a piece of this, but I heard you talk about things that you could print out for print, for enrichment, or for additional supports, but I wanted to just make sure that the schools that are completely virtual aren't being left out in that. I saw that you have the other online instructional things for remediation, but I just wanted to make sure because it almost sounded like there were things that you could print out that weren't available to kids who are strictly online.
No, so shame on me. Basically, here's the deal. If you, there are anything that you have in print, with the exception, we do have the option to add on novels. Those are print novels. So I want to kind of just apart from that though, your student edition, your teacher edition, any of the differentiation resources are going to be found online. Now, the reason I kind of made that distinction between printable and not, I'll show you this really quickly, is that like, for example, like in the text library, you're going to have printable versions of a text and then also the e-version. And so sometimes people they go to the e-version and they're like, that girl told me I could print that. And then they go to the e-version and it does not look as nice. That's because some are printable versions of the same thing. So there is no resource that you would not have access to if you were fully virtual. And we do have a very high number of districts that use this as a 100% virtual implementation. So yeah,
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to tie into that question. There are some schools, even within my school where I teach, there's some classrooms that are going to want to be 100% virtual, and some classrooms that are going to want to be 100% consumable. Is that possible?
Yeah. And I mean, I've been in classrooms. I was in one where even, the teacher was just kind of like, choose your own adventure. She had some kids, that were in the print, some that were on digital, and like that worked for her. But yeah, I mean, what it's going to come down to is just whether or not you have access to the print resources, and then whether you choose to use just those or the virtual. There's no, I mean, there's no like into the literature police. There's not like a right and wrong way to implement, in terms of the medium. So you would be absolutely fine. There's a ton of flexibility there. Other questions?
And when we did training and to support you, we could really, depending on like your school, Becca, we could go into, the kind of to help differentiate even amongst when we train. So here's some print resources if you're going to go all print, or here's all the digital that if you're going to do a digital. So we would try to help differentiate that way when we do some training so that you could figure out which part of the spectrum you really want to use.
I think I don't see any more questions, and I want to honor everyone's time tonight. So thank you once again.